And so I do wonder if Sydney sees this and was just waiting for Mikey to have one slip up so that she could, really pursue this Xzavier guy. Back to discuss another couple from Netflix's version of Temptation Island Season 2. And I'm honestly excited to talk about today's couple, actually. We are talking about Mikey and Sydney, who have quite the complicated journey to discuss. And I don't know if a lot of people are going to be watching these videos, but if you are watching, I would like your thoughts on this couple. This is one of the two couples that I would really like to see other people's opinions on how this all played out, because the backstory for this couple, the history between this couple, is, I think, the main point that we have to, of course, start with, but also continue to talk about as we go along and discuss their journey on this season. Because we get the backstory about how Mikey was this big old player in college. And I think because of that, this entire relationship is just built on mess. Because Mikey is a mess, quite frankly. But also because of his cheating past. Now, we get this backstory as the season goes on that not only was Mikey a player in college, but when they were together in college, they got together when he was, I guess, trying to get over his ex, and then he left Sydney for that ex at one point, and I think that is an important note to make. But then another important note is that that ex that Mikey went and tried to have a relationship with, she cheated on him. And then he ran back to Sydney, and it sounds like they've been together ever since for a year before they came onto this show. But they've been involved for more than a year. They've just been in a more serious relationship for a year after getting past all of that mess. He admits many a times throughout this season that he was a hoe in college. And now he's here to prove that his player days are gone. It's also important to note that Sydney is the one that brought them on this show. And I really do feel like it was a major test for Sydney to see if this relationship is going to make it or break it. Right off the bat, we see Mikey's big personality come through with the singles. He immediately has this three amigos group, even though it's three amigas, of Cristal, India, and Jasenia that he hits it off with. He seems to have the closest connection with India as the time goes on. Meanwhile, on the other side, we see this guy, Xzavier, who is into Sydney. And Xzavier is a good-looking man. I can say this as a straight guy, just being honest. I can see the appeal of Xzavier. He almost, however, does seem too good to be true as the season goes along. Because not only is he an attractive guy, but he seems to be emotionally available, very caring. I mean, frankly, the whole package. And so I do wonder if Sydney sees this. I was just waiting for Mikey to have one slip up so that she could, really pursue this Xzavier guy who is very charming. Because right after her first conversation with Xzavier, they learned that they both live close to Charlotte. And in that conversation, Sydney did say that she knows Mikey is a flirt and is already probably doing something to piss her off. So I feel like Sydney came into this season already expecting the worst. Maybe, as some people are arguing, wanting Mikey to do the worst so that she can pursue somebody else herself. She did end up going on a first date with Xzavier, and Mikey went on his first date with India. And then right off the bat, when Sydney chose to go on a date with Xzavier, in his confessional, Mikey is crying. And we see this a lot this season. Mikey is highly emotional this season, doing a lot of crying, not just in confessionals, at the bonfires, sometimes back at the house with all these single girls. A lot of crying from Mikey this season, that he became quite the drama king. We'll break it down a little more as we go along here. One thing that also happened, though, when they were picking first dates, they were both there together, and Sydney felt like Mikey wasn't even looking at her and that he was being immature about the whole situation. And I think that was Mikey's tough guy act. I feel like we learned from Mikey that he's very emotional, but he tries to hide it in an unbothered act, something many guys do, especially when we're younger. So I'm giving Mikey a pass on that, although sometimes I do wonder if all of his crying was manipulation too. I think that is another possibility. But I'm actually giving him the benefit of the doubt. Because, as Sydney said early in the season, before we even got to the first bonfire, she knows that Mikey just clings to people. And Mikey is clearly just someone that wants to be liked. That's why he is immediately making friends with people on day one, acting like they're going to be best friends. That's why he tries to act unbothered so that people like him. I think Mikey is a very complicated individual, but to me, that's what made him so fascinating to watch. You know, add the whole drama king element to him. He was a very fascinating watch for me. Now, the first bonfire is very important because Sydney sees that Mikey is with India on a date, telling India that he is acting friendly, but he needs to be selfish and take his shot. As soon as Sydney saw that, she broke down, cried, wanted to run off for a while, which she did. And she immediately said that was the last straw for her. She's done, saying he could go ahead and fall in love with another girl. As the season went along, though, Mikey did not really pursue other people. And so I see a lot of people upset with Sydney, saying she immediately got upset with something that Mikey said, but his actions were better than his words. You know, people are always saying, let's see people's actions, not their words. But what you have to do is you have to take in the history of this relationship. And the history of this relationship for Sydney is that Mikey has always kind of been this hoe who has constantly chosen this other ex of his over Sydney. And so I feel like Sydney already came in with a lot of grief from that. And to see that Mikey is saying that he needs to be selfish and take his shot with some other girl, I understand Sydney's reaction to that. And I understand why she was kind of immediately done right after seeing that. On the flip side, Mikey sees the first bonfire with how she is opening up to Xzavier more. Mikey gets very emotional watching this happening, saying he wants to punch Xzavier. He has another breakdown, crying about it. He talks about in this first bonfire how God put him on earth to make everyone around him comfortable and to have fun, but he doesn't feel good, and he's doing himself a disservice. And I think that statement really showed us who Mikey is. He wants everyone else to be comfortable around him. He wants to be the life of the party. He wants people to like him. But he's doing a disservice to himself because he's not living in his own emotional truths. And he's also said during this bonfire that it's scary when you love somebody. And I do believe that Mikey loved Sydney. Of course, none of us know how he felt in that love triangle with Sydney and his other ex and what happened in the past, but he was clearly young back then when that did happen. But I really do believe he grew to like Sydney, and why he had such a hard time during this season and why he had so many breakdowns emotionally is because he had to sit there and watch Sydney fall in love with Xzavier as the season went along. And I do believe it was actually heartbreaking for Mikey to watch. So it really is no wonder that he had a tough go emotionally. Others have made points, and I have kind of agreed, that he friended a lot of the women too early, and maybe that put him in the friend zone. Maybe it's not that Mikey didn't take his shots. Maybe it's that nobody actually wanted to take a shot with him because of the way he was acting while he was there, and him maybe friend zoning himself with some of the other women there. That's a possibility. For Sydney, though, she really got pursued hard by Xzavier. Xzavier made this really kind of cool card that he put a lot of effort into that said that she is the prize. And from there, it was kind of an all go for her and Xzavier. They had a really good date together, and you could clearly see Sydney on a high after that. And I think from Sydney's perspective, as we discussed the dramatics with her relationship with Mikey, I do think that she just wanted to be seen as the prize to someone. She wanted to be someone's first choice. I feel like all along she didn't feel like Mikey's first choice because of the whole incident with his ex. So I definitely see this journey from both Mikey and Sydney. I can see both of their perspectives. But also, like, Xzavier was a big pursuer of Sydney. You know, at one point played the guitar for him. Sydney was looking at him biting her lip, which is something that Mikey did not like seeing a clip of. And then Xzavier played a song for Sydney at an outing. And this was just more of a guy finally treating Sydney like a prize. Now, I have seen some guys make this comment that it's a ridiculous thing to watch as a guy, a girl just say she just wants to be the prize, because if a guy went on a reality show and said that he just wants to be treated as the prize, he would be laughed out of the building. And I do agree with that. I can see how some of the guys' perspectives are not exactly happy with the way Sydney handled all of this, and how, you know, it shouldn't necessarily be a prize in a relationship. A relationship is not a total gift-giving experience. Relationships are work. Relationships go through cycles. I think relationships do need to have some sort of even footing in the relationship for it to work. I think both parties need respect in the relationship. Not one person in the relationship can only be treated like a prize. That is true. But I also do think that Sydney and Xzavier did fall for each other. Now, Xzavier could have just been a love bomber. It's possible with the way they acted. The second bonfire was also bad for Mikey. He had to see Sydney getting to know Xzavier more, holding hands, basically saying they're dating. Mikey was trying to say he understood all of this after that, said that he has to accept that she is living in her truth, but he did say that she is his best friend, and he is trying not to feel something about how his mom always told him that you can't want someone who doesn't want you. After that, though, after again how he was trying to be tough, we see him crying in confessional again, saying that it is hard to watch Sydney do this with another guy because he thought she loved him, because it had only been a week from that point. And that's why I said earlier, I think all of Mikey's breakdowns is because he did have to sit there and watch Sydney fall in love with another guy while his heart is breaking. I really do see that from his perspective. As the season went along, Sydney and Xzavier were just full steam ahead. They got intimate on a date. They ended up sharing their first kiss one morning, which Mikey, of course, had to watch their intimate date, had to watch their first kiss. Mikey had to break down again watching this because he said he loves her so much. He chose to watch a second clip, was seeing how Xzavier makes her feel seen and heard, and that's all a girl wants. Saw her drawing a heart on Xavier's back. Mikey is seeing their sexual connection here. He's upset because just 2 weeks before this, Sydney sat at his sister's wedding and told his mom that I love your son. So once again, understandable how Mikey feels through all of this. But I think the problem for Mikey here is it was just a little too late. And I did wonder watching this season, Did Sydney drag Mikey on this show to get revenge on him for all the grief he put her through in the past? It's always a possibility. I don't actually think that, but I did think that at times that it was a possibility. I think by the end, I just think, like the host said all along, I think Sydney came onto the show with good intentions. She said all along she came to arrive with Mikey and to leave with Mikey, but then she did fall for another guy. And I think she had this preconceived notion about how Mikey is, so that when he said he's going to be selfish and take his shot, she thought his actions were actually going to match his words, even though they didn't. At the third bonfire, I believe, is when Sydney saw Mikey talking about how he is resisting the temptation of India, and the host asked Sydney if subconsciously Sydney was looking for a reason to say, "I'm done." She once again said she had good intentions coming in here, but I do think when the first thing came along that triggered her where Mikey is concerned, she was over it. When they sent videos to each other, Mikey got a rough video from Sydney saying that it's basically too little, too late. She has seen better with Xzavier, and it's too little, too late. She now sees what she deserves and what she is worth, and it's so much more than she was getting. She said she was making herself smaller in the relationship so that Mikey could shine, and she doesn't want to do that anymore. And of course, Mikey, hearing this, is upset because he didn't want to come on the show in the first place, and it's pissing him off that he might leave without her. I think at the final bonfire, they discussed what they needed to discuss. Mikey was in pain. He felt betrayed the first bonfire, said he's been going through hell the whole time, watching her biting her lip right off the bat when Xzavier was playing the guitar for her. Mikey basically did have to watch her fall in love, like I've been saying, and that's what hurt Mikey all along. Sydney reiterated that she had one goal when she first came here, wanted to walk in with him and walk out. But when she told her story about their history, every guy asked her what brought her there, and she told them what she went through, and they all said she deserved better. She told Mikey he never put her first and never shows her off. She was making herself small so he could shine. Sydney said that Mikey loved the idea of her, but hasn't really loved her, and she found something deeper in herself and has grown a connection with someone else. I'm glad that in the end, Mikey seemed to be able to prove that college Mikey was dead, but she said that the past pain was always still there, obviously. And Sydney said that this was the first time that Mikey was having a real conversation with her, that Mikey was always running from his feelings, which we learned from Mikey all along, how he had this tough exterior but was having all these breakdowns. I would like to think that Mikey had a lot of growth from this experience. That's what I got from Mikey, and I hope it holds true for him. I think we kind of, in a way, got to see a boy become a man when it comes to a relationship anyway. He was very immature when he was younger. He was a player. He didn't know how to do anything serious. He took Sydney for granted this whole time, lost her. Now, hopefully, we'll be able to have real conversations in relationships going forward. I feel like at one point, don't quote me on this, but I feel like Maggie said at one point he just wants to be loved. And I think I get that from Mikey. We've seen in real life on social media, he's lost weight since the show aired, like 60 pounds or something. He looks good. And I think, unfortunately, maybe Mikey needed this tough experience. Sydney did leave the show with Xzavier. I don't know for sure if they're still together. They did just do a TikTok together recently, although it was with more men than just Xzavier from the show. That could be a hint that they're still together. They could just be friends. Don't know when more of that will come out. But to me, I was able to see their journey from both of their perspectives. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I would love to know in the comments what you feel about Mikey and Sydney this season. I thought they were entertaining because it was a very complicated history that they had and a complicated journey that they both went on.